Last week we had a special guest with us. This week we have another special guest with us, Tammy Armas from Passion Life. Some of you may remember Tammy from her days at Alternatives. So now she's at another pro-life organization that we're going to hear about today. Just a great ministry that we were excited to have you all be exposed to. And so we invited Tammy to come and tell us about Passion Life and the work that they do. And so she graciously agreed to come and talk with us. So we're very glad to have you here with us today, Tammy. Let me pray, and then we'll jump in. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your kindness toward us in Jesus Christ. We thank you for the gift of eternal life through faith in him. We thank you for just the gift of life. And we thank you for this organization and Tammy's work with them. And we ask that you would inform us today, that you would stir us. And we thank you for Tammy and Passion Life and all that they do. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, this is all good. Can you all hear me? Yes. Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is such a wonderful opportunity as I get to travel now around the U.S. and visit in churches and with people. It's always nice to come home and know people who know me and know our story and know the alternative story and things like that. So when Craig texted me, I was like, yes, absolutely, I will be here. Just to share a little bit about, obviously you know that I was the director, I was the CEO at Alternatives for 10 years, and I think I would label this talk the lifting of my head, and I hope to lift each of your heads to see the global destruction of abortion and how the Lord did that for me, even here in Escondido, through the work at Alternatives. One of the things that when I did leave Alternatives, I love leading. I love leading a team. My heart has always been for the people that surrounded Alternatives, for all of you, for the people that poured in, gave their time, talent, and treasure. That's always been my desire to serve alongside. And so the opportunity came actually after a prayer of my husband had said, if you don't do anything at Alternatives, what would you want to do? And I said, well, I would love to do mission advancement for John Enzor, who is a dear friend of mine for years. And he said, well, call him. I said, no, I'm not going to call him. I had it out of the blue. Well, 2 weeks later, I got an email from him looking for a director of mission advancement. So God will just continue to push you. So he did. Just wanted to show you my family. Since Alternatives, we are a prolific family. I just am so excited about that. My kids have, all three of them, the oldest is in the wedding gown. She got married last November. My son over here got married in 2020, and my youngest daughter got married in 2021. And in 2 years, they've had 4 kids. So I'm really happy they listened to mom and dad. One that you can't see was born in May, and that's little Cassius. So he's my little dear, but they all don't live here. One lives in Tennessee, one lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the bride is up at Hume Lake. She's the program director up there at the lake. So she's in a really tough ministry as well, high school ministry. That's the tip of the arrow right now, and we know that. This is a picture. When I first started with Alternatives, Emmanuel Faith, my home church, asked me to go to China and speak in the underground churches. What some of you might not know is I fell on the battlefield of abortion when I was 19 with my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, and the father and grandfather of all those kids. To me, that's just a story of God's grace and mercy where 2 people totally walked away from what he was telling us to do. And I remember distinctly saying, Lord, I promise you I'll be back. I just don't see how this is going to work out any other way. And he knew I would be back, and he had me even go back and speak at the Planned Parenthood at the pregnancy center right next to the Planned Parenthood where we went on our college campus as director at Alternatives. So here is just my, in front of the wall where we went. That's Nancy Lane, Greg Lane's wife. And it was interesting because John Enzor, who's the founder of Passion Life, he helped me with how to script, how to speak to these women in the underground churches. We're battling at that point it was one-child rule. And so here I'm coming in and sharing with them what God's word says. And several of them really kind of got upset with me afterwards through a translator. And we just kept on pointing back to what God's word says. And so that was why I'm saying lift my head. I sat on the tarmac in Beijing and I looked at Nancy and I said, I will never do world missions again. And note to all of you, which I'm sure you know, don't ever tell God never, because he'll have you there in a heartbeat. So Passion Life, what do we do? Based on Proverbs 24:11, rescuing the most vulnerable where abortion is most concentrated. What percentage of abortions occur annually worldwide? Would anyone want to take a guess, except for people that know what the answer is? They can't say. Would you have any idea of how many abortions occur? Yes, in the U.S. What percentage are we in the worldwide scale? Yes, it is exactly 3%. Most people will say 50. That's generally what we hear. I was at Alternatives for 13 years, and John, during our negotiations, he threw that statistic out. And I said, why is this not known? Why do the pregnancy centers not know this? Why do any of the churches not know this? Never saying, and this is very clear, I'm never saying that going global is more important than what's happening in our own hometown. My hometown, our local pregnancy center, is where we should all be supporting, but also lifting your heads to see what else is happening around the world. When I went to China back in 2010, we were about 3,000 a day babies aborted here in the US, and they were 30,000. So you could see the difference. So there you go. And about 3% of the funding goes to worldwide missions. So it's an opposite. We're working 97% of the problem with 3% of the funds. I don't like to really, I throw that stat out because that's on the thing. That's not important to me. As much as God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills, that funding will come. For me, it's more the people, it's the lives that are constantly being slaughtered for many different reasons, which you'll see. This is a video that I thought would give each of you just a taste. We travel around the country and do regional events. We do one here in Escondido in the spring. And I just came back from one in Texas. We do one in Atlanta and also in North Carolina. But I think this is important for you to hear from the founder and the executive director. These are the two men that I work closely with about Passion Life.
I live in such a way that I can bring life-saving help in a life-changing way. For us, that was the inner city of Boston, where we were living and raising our children, and we ended up starting 6 pregnancy help clinics.
What happened? Is it not working?
I've always tried to figure out, where can I live in such a way that I can bring life-saving help in a life-changing way. For us, that was the inner city of Boston, where we were living and raising our children, and we ended up starting 6 pregnancy help clinics in and around the Boston area. And we used to start thinking, well, where are we most needed in the country? And that took us to places like Miami, where there were 37 abortion businesses in Miami. Almost all of them were placed in minority neighborhoods. And I thought, that is totally unjust. We can't let that go unchallenged. So I went down to Miami and I started meeting with a number of pastors. And over the next year, we opened a pregnancy center where there were 7 abortion clinics within a mile of the office. We kept asking, where are we most needed? Where are we most needed? And the answer to this question really shocked me. I really had to start to reevaluate whether the neediest places in the world were even in the United States at all. We represent 3% of the worldwide abortion at most. And so we began to ask, how do we turn the Christian pro-life pregnancy help movement into a global missions movement?
Missionaries are always looking for a flashpoint with the culture, something that makes what they're saying about Jesus demonstrable and relative to their life. And in China and Kazakhstan and Romania and Bangladesh and Cuba, everyone knows someone who has been through an abortion crisis or is in one now. This lady comes up to us and she says, I'm pregnant and my abortion appointment is at 3 o'clock this afternoon. When she went to her pastor, he hadn't known what to say or do. But he said, but I'm going to hear some guy from America who are talking about abortion tomorrow. Why don't you come with me? And when the pastors in that room over lunch began to realize the story that was unfolding right in the room around us, they immediately jumped into action. And all these leaders, ministry leaders and pastors began praying for her. And they began saying, what can we do to help you? Can we help you find another job? I know someone in our church who's hiring. Can we find you another place to live? Do you need somewhere safe to go? They're answering all the questions. And John and I looked at each other and said, there's a transformation that's just taken place in this room. The Holy Spirit did it because they got it. They saw it and they got it. They said, we want to join in the rescue movement, obeying God in taking the cross to the places that are most difficult and where vulnerability threatens to extinguish even human life and abort faith along with it sometimes. It's a platform for ministry that is unparalleled in our modern world. And as missionaries, we can see the Lord take that trauma and that horror and all the pain of that and turn it into an open window for the gospel.
Thank you. John recently spoke at a World Missions Conference in Virginia, and in his keynote, he wrote this pamphlet called The Moral Crisis of Abortion and World Missions, What's the Connection? And I left several copies out on the table outside if any of you would like them. If there's not any left and you want one, I've also left Connect cards where you can fill out information and ask for, you can sign up for our texting whenever we go on a trip, and so you can hear about, it's actually day-to-day where we are and what we're doing, and sign up for newsletters and things like that. But this, I love this. I share this with everybody. It's the greatest connection between abortion and world missions and how he puts it together. Now, as John said, he's a pastor, and then he opened pregnancy centers. What he didn't tell you in that video is during his tenure as a pastor in Boston, they were having a group discussion about abortion, and one of the women in his congregation stood up and said, I had an abortion last year. And he said, I started to get hot because I was like, oh no, why didn't you come to me? And she said, I prayed and asked the Lord to send me someone who would help me, and I didn't feel like there was anyone that would be willing to help. And he said, at that point, I felt like I had blood on my hands, that my silence or my not welcoming might have preempted that. So John and I often say, we come to where we are right now on the road to redemption. He has his story, I have mine, but we're here and we want to level that playing field as pastors and as people in the church. So saying that, I wasn't clear earlier with my story. I know in a room this size, I might not be the only one, and that's we don't speak on this except for the grace and love and mercy of the gospel, because we can't do this on our own. So I just wanted to make that point clear. Okay, where are you most needed? Believe it or not, these are the 3 hot spots in the world: Eastern Europe, and of course Southeast Asia, and then the Caribbean. No one believes that the Caribbean would be the highest. Cuba is actually the highest rated country in the world. First thing, I know you're all thinking, well, it's Catholic. How does that happen? This has been going on for years. Ironically, my husband's Cuban, and we, through all our time at Alternatives, his mother never said anything, and then I'm flying over to Cuba last year, and my husband and brother, and we're all talking to her, and they're like, Tammy says that abortion's really, really high in Cuba. And she says, claro que sí. And yeah, of course. Well, then it turns out the boys now learn that their grandmothers had aborted babies, because it's a way of life over there. It's not a one-child rule, but there's oppression, there's financial issues. A pastor that I got to meet with when I was in Cuba, I was visiting pregnancy centers and digging deep into the girls' histories and how have they been helped by the work that's being done down there, so I could report back to our donors where their money was going. And the pastor had said to me, when he and his wife got pregnant, they went to the doctor, and the first thing the doctor said is, what are you going to do with it? That's the mentality in that country, because it can be too much. So what are you going to do with it versus congratulations? So I just leveling that to people don't understand that. And it was very eye-opening, very sobering for me to be back in the country where my husband's family grew up in, and to see this. But there's hope, there's great hope, and the pregnancy centers that are being built, the blessing of these people and what we're seeing is phenomenal. So this is John's daughter right here on the left. She was the one that actually called him and said, Dad, come help me, because I'm speaking in the underground churches and these pastors are just not getting it. So on the way over on the airplane, he wrote 4 questions on a napkin. And that's what we're going to share with you, which is our 4 questions training, which we do all around the world, those are the napkins that we give out at events. I've often thought, and you can pray for this, that I will have the courage one day, as I'm on one of my flights. You know, Southwest always has their little, don't get your breadcrumbs in your keyboard or whatever. I would love to hand out these questions and say, you know, it's a audience that can't leave. Maybe they'd listen, but I don't know. I might get thrown overboard too. So, special challenges of China. So we started in China in 2012. Was the one-child rule back then. Went to 2-child, 3-child. Right now, it's completely lifted, because they understand that it's unsustainable right now. So they're really looking. In fact, we were over there in August talking to different people, because their people don't want to have babies anymore, because you've told them one child is what you should do. So now, how are they going to get their people to have babies? It's a destruction of the family. This is what to us looks like a normal building, and this is what is actually written on that building. Beat it out, abort it, miscarry, just never give birth to it. Sadly, that's where what they've grown up with. This woman right here is called, her name is Sister Bai. She is somebody that comes alongside and helps the women. We have boots on the ground over in China, and they've built pregnancy centers right in communist-run hospitals, which is just amazing. I know one of the abortionists at one point told John, "I'm a mother too. I know what you're doing." And she's obviously okay with it. But our director of Latin America often says, when you come from communist countries, your government becomes your faith, and that's where you listen, and that's the way you go. Cuba, China. So it's a very different way than where we have been. So just showing some of these pictures. I show this picture because this woman works alongside women, but I wanted to show you that, again, just like at Alternatives, it's relationships. It's just not have the baby and let them be. So this is a picture of this woman when he was just a little boy, and we check in on them. We always, you'll see other pictures where we want to make sure how these people are doing, people that have been saved, and babies that have been saved. This is a Muslim woman in 2019. She had an ultrasound, and she found out she was having 4 babies. She already had 1. So she's already distressed because she's pregnant again. What is she going to do? And she finds out she's going to have 4. So she leaves and walks around the building like 4 times. What am I going to do? And just what Mark was saying, the church, the underground churches over there come alongside. The Good Samaritan, how can we help you? What can we do? We will help you with this. And sure enough, she ended up having those 3 little girls and 1 little boy, and you can see the older daughter on the top, and then the triplet, the quads. Whenever I speak to the people in China, I'm like, how's she doing? Where's her spiritual life? And we can see that she's taken her headpiece off, and she slowly, not yet, but you can all pray that this woman slowly moves to the saving grace of the Lord. This is just a little stat. The Chinese underground churches were so excited with the 4 questions, what we were teaching, they decided to train 1 million people in a month. Now, would that be an oversized goal for the church to do if I came back next month to see if you could train 1 million people? It's zealous. But this is where these countries, they're down and out, and they understand that this is a living hope. They didn't make it. They only got 750,000, but you know, what a blessing that is. To focus on the 4 questions, we need to hear the word, obey the word, and share the word. That's one of the things that John always says. Once you hear the 4 questions, you have to be training others right away. So here we go with the 4 questions. And by the way, they are on our website. You can download the leadership guide. You could have a 4 questions training here and have other people come. We can come do it. I'm doing it at Emmanuel Faith in January. However, the program is how you want to do it. What does the Bible say about human life, including life in the womb? By the way, these questions are very simple. You're going to go, what? But to go through that, how do our people really understand? Where does it say in the Bible? And so we go through these different things. What does the Bible say about human life, including life in the womb? What does the Bible say about the shedding of innocent blood, including abortion? Because, you know, we all hear that. Well, it doesn't mention abortion in the Bible. Everybody gets thrown that. Well, we'll go over that. How do we bring the grace of the gospel to the guilt of abortion so that people are forgiven and set free? That's usually the question that I get to answer, because we always want somebody standing there sharing their own testimony, because that's just a living example of what God can do in your life upon the most heinous acts that we can perform here. And what does God call us to do to prevent the shedding of innocent blood? So there's your directive. What I do is different than what Marcia does, than what Kim does. And so where does everybody's place fit in this? And how can you come alongside and walk with women? Because it's until abortion is unthinkable, it will continue to be an option, and people will fall on that battlefield. And there's many warriors that have fallen on the battlefield, and there's many warriors that are going to fall this very week. And so how can we speak loudly about this? I know that becomes very political, and I'm not going to get into the political part of that. I will say part of my journey with alternatives was we did have a lawsuit against the state of California. And when we did, Camilla Harris was the Attorney General, and she summons me to go up and be deposed in her office, which was something I could check off my bucket list that I was able to do and still stand. She had won the Senate, so she wasn't there as her assistant attorney general. But my point to that is this: to sit in the state that you live in the country that you lived in your whole life, and defend your faith was very eye-opening. When I was back on that tarmac in Beijing, I thought, this will never happen here. I won't have to defend my faith. And here I was defending my faith. So do you see the lifting of the head? It keeps lifting. My goal was to stay in Escondido and hunker down my whole life and do this. And it continues to lift. So where have we been? This is outdated. We had this made in May, I think, and it's outdated already because we've been to 2 more countries, but we travel pretty much all over the world. When people call us and they say, we want your training, we lots of times it's churches, pastors that will say, come help train our ministry leaders. So we head out. This is in Cuba. Now, a few slides back, you saw a woman having an ultrasound, and the woman was lying on the couch, and somebody was looking over. Let me just go back so you can, oh, there she is. So this woman right here is Dr. Anya. She would go house to house. She's in Cuba. She would find out where a girl was pregnant and go with a handheld ultrasound that's no bigger than your cell phone, which we've blessed them with, and go knock on their door and give them an ultrasound. Now, the generational part, here's grandma over here in the background who's forcing that abortion. Because I had abortions, your mom had abortions, where it's just going to be. But now, she says, wait a second, what are you looking at? And to see the baby. So I actually met that grandma when I was in Cuba last year. So, but that's Dr. Anya there last year, and this is Jeannie Pernia, the director of South America. By the way, a previous abortionist, very, very similar to an Abby Johnson story. And in fact, the pregnancy center that John built in Miami was previously her abortion clinic. And she was sitting in a church pew when John stood up to speak one day. She too got hot. Oh no, I've got to turn my ways. So she is on fire, and she's great. Again, Dr. Anya, going house to house. What a different model than what we have here, right? But it works. This is in Sibuney, which is the southeast side of Cuba. Pretty much the pastor there tells me that abortion is eradicated in that city. Now, this is in Bayamo. We traveled to 2 cities, and this is a young woman who I got to interview, and I really began thinking about this generational stuff. And grandma is out in the other room holding the baby, of course, very proud to hold her granddaughter. And I said, can I ask you a question? Did she want you to abort the baby? And she's like, yeah. But some of these young girls are fighting for their babies. So I've actually talked to Sally Burke, who's Moms in Prayer, and they have people there in Cuba. So the grandmother's in touch, just really trying to change culture, to change what you've been indoctrinated to think. And it comes that generational, I now see there was generational sin and praying against that. This was the only gentleman I met in the 5 days that I was in Cuba visiting with these women. And baby Jesus is here because Daddy stood up and said, we're going to do this. She was all ready to go. She's not smiling. Lots of times they don't smile because their teeth might be bad. But I just love that picture because he stood in the gap and continued to fight for his baby. And she even went in for the abortion, and he stayed outside and prayed, and she came out without having it. This is back in 2022, but I love this picture. Colombia, South America is booming right now because legislature has changed and everything's legalized, so the churches are saying, what do we do? Because lots of times they were hiding behind what the government was saying. So here we have 600 pastors and leaders together. That's another goal. I would love to have 600 pastors and leaders in Escondido come together for a training. But this little picture down on the bottom, they're crying, they're weeping because of their silence, just like Pastor John says, his silence. So speaking boldly, what a blessing for your church, where you have Craig and Ryan that will speak boldly about it, and always have. It's they're people that I talk about when I'm traveling and talk about churches, where I could see that love and that desire to understand the purpose of this and the value, the sacredness of life, and not to hold back and not to not speak. I call this our flow chart because begins with us training the leaders in the towns, then the leaders train church members, and the church members go out into their neighborhoods and help build pregnancy centers. Now, most of us are previous directors from pregnancy centers, so like I've been in Bogota talking to the pastor about his building and what he could do with it, but I don't know downtown Bogota. I looked at that building, and OSHA here in the US would shut that building down. I don't know what they could do, but we can give them tidbits of advice as to what to do or give them examples. Again, pregnancy help ministries are organized. Babies are saved, and communities see the power of Christ. So very often, whether it's local or global, the woman chooses life for the baby. Many times that baby's life saves the mother, not just then, but for eternity. So that's the blessing. We can see that. We never say it's going to be easy. It's never easy. Parenting is never easy. Okay, remember Mark's story of the woman that said, I'm here and I'm having an abortion at 3 o'clock? Here she is, and here they are. Here are some of those trained the leaders that were being trained said, okay, what can we do? Well, the only thing we can do is pray, and she's going to walk out. So you see her face. She's not happy. You see them. They're deep in prayer. Something about the work that we do, we never know. We leave the country, and then we might not hear because we have our boots on the ground, and whether have you heard from them? Oh, no. A year later, we go back to speak Vietnam. John and Mark get halfway through the day, and Mark says this. He says, I'm getting up to do the third question, the grace of the gospel. And the back door opens, and in she walks. What a difference in the face. Just such a blessing. And again, that group came and got to pray for her, and they heard the first part of the story, but then see the last part, and sweet Mark is just ecstatic. Again, these are different countries that we're in. India is a very big country that we've often thought of it as our second China. We have boots on the ground there, and Mark travels quite a bit over to that area, north and south. Some of those are areas that are very unsafe to go in, but we continue to go. And the battles that they have doing this are very difficult, but we just keep trying. This picture down here reminds me, this was during COVID, when we're all locked down. our model is obviously we all work remotely out of our homes. We couldn't travel to India, but we can train people through Zoom. We trained over 28,000 people that year when the world was shut down in India. So that's huge. And of course, Africa. Africa is, we have a woman in Africa. She's in 19 countries and has helped start over 300 pregnancy centers. I think you were there, right, when she spoke. Right? She speaks here in the U.S. She's affiliated with a pregnancy center down south. And what a blessing it is to have her be a part of us. We partner with her. We help she and her husband. There she is again. And so lots of, in a partnership like that, we give almost $60,000 a year between ultrasounds and different things, going and doing trainings over there as well. John loves this picture, so I always put it in because it says 4 questions Malawi, 4 questions. So here it is. We're showing them the handheld, and those are easy to travel with, to get through airports, to give to the people. We don't just give to anyone. We have a medical team and several people on our board are nurses, so they will go be our medical advisory team and train people as to how to use them. Years ago, they wanted the big ones, and I remember when I was at Alternatives, we wanted the big dinosaur, and nobody wants to see a 3D, 4D of a tiny baby. That it's not like it when you have a 9-month baby. But it was interesting because we brought several of the big ones over last year. One of the local pregnancy centers actually donated one and got it. No, that was into Bogota. But they've now switched it. They all want the small ones, which is great. So we can get them over there. Last year we placed 9 in Africa and Latin America, and I think it's only going to go up. Latin America is really booming right now. Africa is booming, and we're back as long as China allows us to come in there. We're going to keep on going in there. Right, I think I did mention we have 5 pregnancy centers in communist-run hospitals, and they would love to have, last year I heard over 1,000, they would love to have more and more people being trained. So the littlest missionary, some of you, if you've seen the fetal models that the local pregnancy centers use, this is one that we just developed. I know it's very small. I have a bunch on the table out there if you'd like to take one. This is a medically accurate 9-week, 3-day, and you can see the detail of the baby. I've had people tell me that's disturbing, and I understand. I understand, because it's a tough issue. But this is a life, the sacredness of this little life, and that's why we call it the littlest missionary, because we can go into countries, and as we're doing the training, then you hand those out. People get it. It took us 3 years. We worked with several of the pro-life physicians to get the medical accuracy and the detail of that. When I was in Bogota, actually 2 years ago, we were doing a training, and I handed out all the models. I gave 50 to each pastor so they could go back to their congregation and start. And this pastor's little girl was sitting there, and she's lifting her hand like she wants one. And I'm like in my business mode thinking, this is donor money. It's not I can't give it to her to play with. But I thought, okay, I looked at her dad, and her dad said, and I put it in her hand because I wanted to see what she would do. And immediately, she starts rocking it. She knew what that baby was. bigger part of that story is we break at lunchtime. He and her go to the park so she can swing on the swings. He runs into a parishioner who's distraught. He had just kicked his 17-year-old daughter out of the house because she was 20 weeks pregnant. And he said she can't live here anymore. Remember John's story? As soon as you hear it, obey it, share it. The pastor's like, I'm under the gun now. I have to do this. And she's in the sand playing with a baby. So he reaches over, he takes the baby from her and goes and talks to the gentleman. Says, your baby, your grandbaby is 20 weeks. This is 9 weeks. That's the story we heard. We leave Colombia. It was a great story. What's the outcome? Whatever happened? Well, back in January, I got a call from one of our Colombian people. Baby Eve was born, and they're back together, but that baby lived. And what I just share that with you because that's a blow-by-blow story where I didn't even want to hand it to her for a variety of reasons, and I'm so grateful I just went for it. So those are the babies that are out there. Okay, this is a final video. This couple both have cerebral palsy in China. What do you think their doctor's saying to them automatically? They don't have a child, but she finds herself pregnant. Well, she should abort that baby. So she didn't, because the Christians were there helping her. This is a video. I want you to watch. This is, we call it the whatever it takes video. Baby doesn't look distressed, does he? Wait till she gets to the socks. She dresses him better than I ever dressed my kids. Even making sure everything's tucked. So there you have it. Where God has plans for a baby, he has plans to take care of a baby. And if this couple had listened, that little one wouldn't be there. Who do you think is going to take care of mom and dad when he's older? He's perfectly fine, has nothing wrong with him. Just this is to show you some of the teams that we have. Our Latin American team, Sandy Casino here. He's our Cuban director right now in Cuba. I told you 2 pregnancy centers. I told you about 2 pregnancy centers. There's 15 provinces in Cuba. We now have people starting in each one of the provinces. So last I heard, there's about 18 starting up. So we keep going back there. I'm praying. I just put a grant out to somebody to get $20,000 so we can supply Cuba with 20,000 tiny babies, because that would definitely help. Our Africa team, India, Vietnam, China. And then I always call this the whatever it takes, because South America had asked us a few years ago to sign an alliance with them that we would go into several different countries and train their people. So that's what we're doing. Again, the Connect cards are out front. That's anything that you want to connect with, even if you just have a question you don't want to ask here. I wanted to leave some time to answer questions if people had questions. I understand that it's a very difficult topic. There's so many parts to it, and I just want to be grace-filled with it because it affects people in different ways, but be able to answer what the goodness of the Lord, what we're doing, and I hope you can see that the lifting of our heads, that we can't. I always think it's probably not theologically correct, but this is how I think. I don't want to be like the priest or the Levite. I don't want to be looking this way when someone over here needs help. I want to lift my head and go, okay, how can I help you? Why can't we be good Samaritans and go help someone in need? So, with that, is there any questions that any of you have? Or I've just stunned you all that. And I know it's hard. Well, if you have a question later, or I can even leave my business card. Sometimes people text me and say, I was in your talk and you said this, what did this mean? And we can talk about that. But I do thank each of you for listening and for hopefully understanding. One of the ways that we get around the country is to do storming the strongholds in people's homes. We call it storming the strongholds. What it is, it's like just coffee and dessert and go through a video. You basically saw a very similar storming the strongholds. But we do that in people's homes where it's a little bit more intimate, groups of 10, and people have questions there. Lots of times in more intimate settings, people will be more prone to ask questions. So because we're global, we travel. So if you have places, your sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles in other parts of the country, I'm West Coast, but I do travel. I'm constantly on the East Coast because there seems to be, West Coast, we're trying to build it up slowly, but we will travel wherever people want us to go and to either do a 4 questions training or to do storming the strongholds and share with others. So I wanted to throw that out to you. Okay, well, thank you so much.